Hey, what's up everyone? It's Duskmos, and today I'm here with the Pill Pedal. Let's check it out. So the Pill Pedal is a stereo ducking device. So it just ducks audio based on a trigger input of some sort. You've got an audio input and output for an audio signal trigger that you can set a sensitivity of, or you have a CV input as well, where you can send a signal in and use that to duck. But otherwise, it passes through audio and it will mute or duck it based on the input signal and where you have your trigger level set. So what that means is you can run a synth through it, for example, and then every time a kick drum hits, you can duck out the synth sound and really give that pumping effect, which is a lot of fun. I've actually had the Pill for a couple years now, but because as soon as I got it, I set it up and used it in my studio for any time I wanted to get some of that pumping sidechain ducking effect. And it's really cool. It basically allows you to add that effect really easily in line to whatever kind of device you want to use it with. And you can get really creative with the way you have it set up. So you could duck a synth with a kick drum. You could have an input of some kind of instrument that would then duck another source. So you could run like field recordings through it and then use a guitar to duck the level of the field recordings every time you hit the bass string. You could use it live. You could put a microphone in a kick drum head, and every time that hits, you adjust the threshold and boom, you've got yourself a ducking effect on the synths or a sampler or whatever you're running through it, and you get that in that live environment and really easy hands-on control, which is super cool. Okay, so now taking a look at the controls and I/O. Starting on this side, which is a little bit counterintuitive, but it kind of makes sense because this is the trigger threshold, and so that's kind of where you start, really. That is the level that you set to activate the ducking effect. So this light will react to the incoming signal, and what you do is tweak it just enough until you start to see the light react in a way that you want. So if you're running a drum loop through it, you can just turn it up just enough until it starts to react on the kick, for example. But if you really want to up the sensitivity and have it react to the kick and the snare, or kind of whatever like the second loudest instrument is in your mix you're running through it, it'll start picking that up and become more and more sensitive as you turn it up. So if you want it to react to every little thing that you're running through, then you crank it all the way up and you'll have tons of little ducks and dips. So next up is the depth control, which is the amount that the signal is ducked as you're running through it. So all the way to the right, it will mute completely. All the way to the left, it'll just be a gentle volume reduction as it gets triggered. So you can make it really subtle, or you can make it really intense and really in your face, and use this in a lot of ways, and that's really fun. This is your release time, and it's the amount of time that it takes for your signal to rebound and recover. So a couple other R's from the dip, the volume dip that comes with the ducking. So if you want it to immediately cut off and then slowly ramp back up over time, you can do that. You can make it immediately, cut out, cut back in if you make that release time really short. So yeah, you've got options to tweak it and tailor it to respond the way that you are looking for. This is your bypass switch. It's a soft latching flick switch. And this is just a bypass LED to tell you whether or not the pedal is activated. You've got jacks on both sides of the Pill. Over here, you've got a CV trigger input on a mini jack. So you could use it with modular or some other sort of CV input. Here you've got the 1/4-inch input jack to trigger over audio. So it'll just react to the audio signal that's coming in. And then these two are effectively a left and right, or two individual mono sources if you wanted to route it that way. That will be ducked by this one. So you can kind of think of this jack or this one interrupting the stereo pair or two mono jacks. And on this side, it's just a mirror image of these, so it's a pass-through. So you can pass through the trigger signal if it's something that you want to use. Say it is a kick drum and you need to route that on from your drum machine or whatever. You don't want to lose that signal, so you can route it back into your mix. And then this is the output of the input. That is the sort of like the return of the duct signal. And then up here you've just got your 9-volt power jack. Okay, so now that you know what all these do and how all this works, let me get it set up and we'll see it in action. So as you can see, there's a bit of a crowded stage going on right now in this first example, and that's because I've got a lot of pieces of gear here that I want to use in conjunction to kind of show what this possible first use case might look like using the pill. And I'd say probably this is the most standard use case for the pill. I'm ducking a synth, in this case the Modor NF-1, with a drum machine, which more or less is just going to activate on the kick pulse from the Roland TR-505, and the synth is being controlled by the key step from Arturia, and and it's all routed into the TX6 and then out into my camera. So to kind of try to give you a rundown of what's happening in the box here, we've got the whole drum mix coming in, the trigger input, and then out the trigger pass through going into its own channel on the TX6. And then in stereo, we've got this pair here going in from the Modor NF-1 coming out this end into the TX6 as well in its own stereo channel. And the Modor is a really fun digital synth that I don't show often on my demos because I actually have it almost permanently hooked up to my main setup for working with in the studio. And so a lot of that stuff like the Analog 4 Mark II and the Rhythm Mark II don't make it to the demo table that often because I have them set up and I'm usually working with those pretty regularly. So yeah, nice to see it on the table again. What little you can see of it anyway. Okay, so now that we know how all the cabling is routed, all the inputs and outputs and where they're going and what they're coming from, what you need to do to get things rolling, which you can always tweak a bit as well in situ, but a good place to start is to just see where your trigger level is based off of what you're sending in. So we activate the pedal. You can see this is just the active light. And this is our LED for the trigger. So if I hit the kick drum, you can see no triggers happening. So if you up it a little bit, you want to kind of make it, there you go. So if you can see it regularly react with like a solid bright light to your trigger source, then you're doing good. And what's cool about that is you can adjust it to whatever you're running through it. So in this case, like I said, I'm sending the whole mix in. So if I find it's reacting a little bit too much, like maybe a really bright, I don't know, cymbal or like a snare or something is activating it as well, I can dial it back a little bit and kind of tidy things up a little. Okay, so now that I know that that's working, I'm actually going to bypass it again so I can play everything clean so you can kind of know where we're starting from. So this is what the pattern sounds like on the 505. So starting there, really basic. And the Modor sounds like this. I'm just triggering the key changes with the key step. So please excuse the timing if I'm off a little bit every now and then. So you can see the triggers lighting up, even though it's bypassed, so you don't have to have it activated to see the trigger, which is cool. So we'll go ahead and activate the pill. So this is a very dramatic example. I'm going to turn the filter down a little bit on the synth so I can talk over it a little bit more. So you've got your release time and your depth. So if you want to make this just a little blip, it'll completely mute the synth channel and bounce right back because the release is so short. You can make it longer, so it really dips out. And you can make it take a long time to come back in. Or set it where it's just completely absurd and almost probably useless for a lot of cases, but it's good to have that flexibility in case there is some reason why you want something to be ducked out for that long. So yeah, you just want to find your sweet spot. And then here, again, depth. So you can bring that back. And you get that more gentle rise and fall. I guess fall and rise. So if we up the release time, because it's not as deep, the depth isn't as deep, you're still hearing it. Which is cool. You have it make a more subtle impact. If you want to. Which is cool. And I'm going to change up the pattern on the drums here so our triggers will double. So you'll hear that as the kick comes in. More of a swing time, I guess. Oh, that timing was so bad. That's my bad. As we can now experiment with the tempo. Bring the cutoff back down a little. Speed up the tempo and you'll not only see the triggers speed up, but you'll hear it in the audio. So you can make it do kind of like a stutter thing if you have the triggers happening frequently enough. Or if the release is long enough, it'll stay ducked for that mini kind of rapid fire trigger action because it doesn't have the time to recover. Back the depth out again. I'm going to go for a random pattern here. I don't know what I've got on here, so. Oh, yeah. So you can see this is triggering on more than just the kicks. And you can really amp it up. And in some cases, it can be, like if the source is loud enough, it can just be solid and you'll just mute the whole thing. but this doesn't feel quite properly rhythmically matched. And you'll get those kind of flows that you'll just feel out based on, yeah, just where everything kind of sits. It's really fun to experiment with. Psycho tempo there, but kind of fun anyway. So you see, again, the triggers are kind of too frequent. And there we go, now we're back to just the kicks. There you go, you're almost to solid now. Bypass. And there we go. And as you notice, when I bypassed, there was no really any change to the audio, just the ducking went away, which is exactly what you want. It's very transparent. So there we go. That's our first setup, ducking a synth with a drum machine. And then I'm going to try another setup here where I'm actually going to inject an effect into the mix, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so I'm back with another setup here, and as you can tell, it's also a bit crowded up here, but for good cause, and we'll go through it. We'll explain everything that's going on here. So we're coming out stereo from the OP-1 field into the Vongon Ultra Shear for reverb. Coming out stereo, actually a little vibrato too. Coming out stereo into the inputs of the pill, and then out of the pill and stereo into the TX6, and then out into the camera. But this time, to spice things up, acting as the trigger, I've got the Electro Faustus drum thing, which is just a contact mic in a pedal box that's sealed up that you can drum on, click on, tap on, yell into if you want to. And yeah, it's just kind of like a hardy enclosure for a contact mic with a jack. And so that's going in as the trigger, but then as you can tell, I have nothing coming out. So I'm not passing that audio through. I'm just using it to act as the trigger for the pill. So I'm just going to noodle around on the OP-1 and then maybe play a bit of a sequence and then just kind of mess around and just show you another use case here. So this is the sound we're working with. pretty cool. And as you can see, the drum thing, I've got this mallet here, and I can tap it, and you see it registers the trigger there. So we'll go ahead and activate. And it's kind of cool because you can, even though I'm playing both right now, you can play the duck effect by using something just like this. And it's really obvious with a nice long decay reverb going on, so you can really hear what's going on. And again, you can adjust the depth and the so you can make this more of a interactive piece, which is really cool to be able to sort of kind of tap in or play in the ducking effect. So I'm going to go ahead and play a sequence. So again, you can get really fast, like you see it registers the tiniest little bounce back of the mallet here. Now I can also up the sensitivity, and well, I could do it without the sensitivity being high, but you can just use the lightest touch, and that's really cool. So I can envision you could have like a little motor and do some weird stuff with like things like tapping this if you want to get real experimental, or just again use it as I am now and then just trigger your own. Kind of cool. So that's using the pill with a trigger source that you're not passing through, and also a pretty unique one at that. Being able to manually trigger is kind of a fun, different way to use this. Now, another third strategy that I'm not going to demo here today would entail even more gear, but it could be something else that you might want to check out if you're interested in a device like this. And that is actually using it in conjunction with a pedal, like the Ultra Shear, for example, where you can go 100% wet. And in that instance, you could have a source that you split. So you could run a clean out and into your mixer or whatever. And then you have a second copy of that signal going to the effect. And if you're getting just the pure wet effect, so just the reverb signal, for example, pass that through and then have that duct separately from like another source, whether or not you want to keep that in line and still play through that audio, you could opt to do or not do. But then that would allow you to just duck the effect and not the whole source and the effect at the same time. Also, imagine if this wasn't a contact mic used as a trigger. Like, this could be set up on a live drum kit. Could be, triggering it that way. So you could have like the kick, the little contact mic inside the kick, or something like this inside the actual drum head. And as someone's playing, then it can be ducking out your synth in like a live band scenario. I know it's a little complicated, maybe a little hard to get your head around, but it's definitely another way, in a lot of ways, that you could use the pill. So what do I think of the pill? Well, I think it is kind of the go-to for a sidechain style effect. It's just easy to just throw this in line on whatever source and trigger you want to use it with, and just get going. It's cool that you can craft your response of the ducking right up top here. Super easy, and you can immediately hear the results and you see what's going on with the LED and the trigger. That's really nice. And it's also super transparent, so you're not noticing any extra noise or coloration. The pass-through is super clean, and yeah, it just gives you that sort of, production ready quality right out of the box. It's also fun. Like you saw in my second demo, hooking up a trigger source and just seeing what happens, the interactions that you can kind of come up with, passing different signals through and just experimenting. You can really kind of take this into some interesting places, and it's just a fun layer to kind of add into the production workflow. And it's interesting because this is a pedal, but it's not really an effect, but it is like it's a volume reduction, but in response to an input. And it's cool. It doesn't change your audio much. It just reduces the volume, but in a cool rhythmic way that, it's, I don't know how to describe it. It's like an anti-effect, but also a really strong effect as like the results go, which is really fun. And I enjoy it. Like I mentioned, it's something that when I got it, I just hooked it up and started using it right away. And it's cool. You can bypass it. You can leave it bypassed until the time comes that you need it and turn it on, and then boom, dial it in and you're set. And that's really, really nice. And it just works. And you got to love that. I also know that the components inside are meticulously like matched and paired, and it's super high quality. And so, it feels like it's definitely like a boutique studio kind of effect, but it's just the only thing of its kind, and it does it at a high level with really nice components. So there's not much to complain about. In fact, there's mostly just some stuff to rave about, so that's good. This does come from a one-man show, one-man band, so the production levels on these aren't super high. You have to sign up for batches, and I think there's a new version on the way. There was a mini version as well, and that's mono, not stereo. So he's always kind of playing and developing it, and I say if you're interested in something like this, definitely head to their website, thepillpedal.com, sign up, and just get on that list, and you can check it out and see kind of what the next iteration of this is going to be. But like I've said, I've had this one, been happy with it, and no issues, and if you're into this sort of effect, I highly recommend it. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.